Hey everyone, Ethan here. I've been playing video games for most of my life, with my first memories coming from when I was around the age of 3 or 4. The reason I mention this is because the Mario series is where I got my start. I'm not exactly sure when I started playing the 2D games, but I vividly remember playing Super Mario Bros. 3 along with my dad on the Wii. Speaking of which, you may notice a trend that when I talk about a Mario game, I will most likely mention my dad, due to us bonding over most games in the series. I also have fond memories of watching the cartoon based around Mario 3. It was quite strange, but very fun. Despite this being a video about the third installment in the Mario franchise, this video is not a follow-up to a previous one, and I'll go into more detail on that shortly. Lastly, I just want to extend a huge thank you to everyone who watched my previous video on Halo 2, with it now taking the crown for having the most views on my channel by far, and it being my first and only video to not only surpass 500 views, but somehow surpass 1,000 views. I've had to revise this part several times now with every new 100 milestone, and I am absolutely blown away by this. Thank you all so much. A big question towards me and this video that is warranted is, why start with the third game, or something to that effect? The answer is actually pretty simple. I simply don't hold Mario's 1, 2, and especially Lost levels in nearly as high regard as I do the third entry. I'm not going to rule out ever doing a video on any of them, but what might be an obvious spoiler, they would not place above this game. That's not to say any of them are bad, because they aren't. Thankfully, most Mario games don't require prior entries to be played to understand how to play or what's going on. With Mario Bros. 3 being the last of the trilogy of original 2D Mario games, it does share similarities to the first two entries. It's mostly its own standalone game, just more so building off of the foundation that the first game built. Mario 3 is a 2D platformer that sees Mario and Luigi trying to protect the Mushroom Kingdom against Bowser and his 7 Koopalings, who have stolen the royalty's magic wands and turned them into various creatures, like Yoshi or a ladybug. There are 8 worlds to save, power-ups to aid you, and enemies standing in your way. The game is played single player or with one other person in local co-op. Player 1 plays as Mario and Player 2 plays as Luigi. This game's version of the Mushroom Kingdom has 8 worlds to explore in a linear order. This game has a world map that you can navigate, although you cannot go past levels that you haven't completed. Each world has a varying amount of levels. Once a level is completed, the level's tile will change to match the letter of the character used to complete it, and you cannot replay it. Besides levels, depending on the world, you can also find toad houses and spade tiles, which can give you items and extra lives respectively. You may also notice that most worlds have patrolling Hammer Bros or some variant of them that move after you exit a level and will fight you if you're on the same tile as them. Not every level needs to be beaten to move on to the next world, since you will often find forks in the road that only require one level or another to be beaten to progress. What is mandatory though is each world's fortress and airship levels, with the latter being what brings you to the next world upon completion. World 1 Grassland doesn't look very grassy from the map, but very much features levels with grassy terrain. World 2 Desert Land is slightly bigger, although it only contains one more level than World 1. It's unique for introducing warp pipes, which act as fast travel points between parts of the world map, but will never let you skip anything. As well as having patrolling Boomerang Bros and a Fire Bro instead of the normal Hammer Bros, and features 2 special levels which are represented by quicksand and a pyramid. World 3 Waterland has never been popular in my household, with every level either being underwater or slightly above water. It doesn't help that this world jumps up in terms of level count, being tied with 2 other worlds for the second most, and it's also the first world to have 2 fortresses instead of 1. Thankfully, it does make up for the level count by including the most toad houses and spade tiles out of any world. This world is also unique for having a boat you use to navigate some parts of the world. World 4 Giant Land has to be my favorite, with it featuring large enemies and objects. The only other notable thing is that the enemies patrolling are Sledge Bros. World 5 Skyland is split in half, the first part taking place in a grassy land on the ground, and the second half taking place in the clouds. Despite this world feeling like 2 in 1, the level count is the same as World 3's. This world does have a special level being a tower. Its layout is very similar to a fortress level and serves as the transition to the sky half of the world. World 6 Iceland is probably my least favorite because I've never been too fond of slippery controls. It's not that bad in this game, but it is certainly long. Unfortunately, it not only has the most normal levels at 10, but also has the most fortresses at 3. World 7 Pipeland revolves around warp pipes and each level heavily features them. This world contains lots of the Muncher enemies instead of Hammer Bros, with them even getting 2 levels dedicated to them. World 8 Darkland is the final world of the game and easily the most unique. Darkland is ruled by Bowser and thus only features 2 normal levels. Instead, the world is filled with auto-scroll levels similar to the airships. There's 2 tanks, a boat, and the contractually obligated airship itself. These levels will also automatically start when you walk over them. Because it's Bowser's domain, there are 0 Toad Houses or Spade tiles. There are 5 hand trap tiles, with 3 of them having the potential to pull you under, featuring their own short level. The last level, instead of being an airship, is Bowser's Castle. There is technically one more world, being the Warp Zone, but that only serves to let the player skip worlds, which we'll go more into soon. Before moving on, while researching for this video, I found out about a hidden level that you could access to the right circumstances. Basically, if your points when completing a level in worlds 1, 3, 5, or 6, and your coin count by the end is a multiple of 11, and your score lines up properly, one of the wandering Hammer Bros on the map will turn into a treasure ship. I know this sounds fake because frankly it does to me too, but the treasure ship is a short level that rewards you with 177 coins, a hidden 1-up, and an item. Mario 3 is a straightforward game with relatively simple level design, which is not a bad thing in the slightest. Your goal in each level is to reach the end of the stage and grab the card in the goal box before the 300-second timer runs out. Like most Mario games, you're given a life pool that will result in a game over if you die while you have none left. This game is rather punishing, making you lose most of your progress in the current world you're in. The only things that don't reset are the fortresses and overworld enemies. Also, anytime you die, you'll be sent back to the last level or building you successfully cleared, which can be potentially disruptive in some cases. There's a few ways to gain extra lives, with the most common ones being getting 100 coins, successfully completing a spade tile, accumulating 3 cards from goals, or grabbing a 1-up mushroom. If you're playing multiplayer, Mario and Luigi have their own separate life pools since they take turns playing levels. This also means that if one player gets a game over, they will be sent back to the start of a world, losing only their progress. There's also a score system, which gives you points for most actions and is mostly irrelevant apart from one lesser known feature. Every 80,000 points you get, an N-marked spade tile will appear in the world map. This takes you to a card matching minigame. Matching 2 correct tiles will award you with that item. Thankfully, even if you mess up, the next time it appears, so long as you didn't turn off your game, you can pick up where you left off. The controls are quite simple. You can walk either left or right, crouch if you're not small, jump, run, swim, and new to this game is the ability to slide down slopes. You can also pick up some objects like Koopa shells or blue bricks and throw them. You pick up objects using the run button, which is also used to use certain power-ups. A new mechanic introduced in this game is the P meter. Basically, while continuously running, you accumulate P speed. When the meter is full, you'll reach max P speed. This lets you jump higher and further and is mainly used in tandem with the raccoon leaf, letting you soar to great heights. While the controls are quite responsive, I have 2 issues with them. The first is quite small, but it's quite easy to accidentally stop sliding since you must be holding down on the stick or D-pad, and any other directional input, however minor, will make you stand up, thus making you susceptible to being hit. The other issue I have is easily fixable in my opinion, which is the awkward placement for running and jumping. No matter which controller scheme you use, running and jumping will always be mapped to face buttons, aka A, B, X, or Y. For me personally, this can be quite awkward when trying to fly with P speed. I wish there was an official option to possibly map either running or jumping to one of the shoulder buttons. Thankfully, I can think of only 2 levels where flying with P speed is mandatory. Let's get into talking about the good stuff, and by that I mean the power-ups. Power-ups are a staple in Mario games. I mean, they don't call them Super Mario for nothing. Mario has 3 states in this game. He can either be small, big with no power-up, or big with a power-up. Getting hit in one of these states will revert you to the previous one, with getting hit while being small kills you. Power-ups are typically found in certain question mark blocks and levels, but can also be found in a variety of places otherwise. They can also be collected outside of levels, which I'll go more into in a bit. The first and most iconic and generic of the power-ups is the Super Mushroom. The mushroom will transform you from small to big, letting you take an extra hit. Being big has the benefit of giving you the ability to crouch, although it can be slightly inconvenient if you're trying to fit through a 1-block gap.
Oh, brother!
Any power-up after this will only appear from blocks if you are already big, otherwise you'll get a mushroom. The next power-up is the Fire Flower, allowing you to shoot bouncing fireballs to take out enemies. You can even use it underwater, which I'm not going to complain about the logistics of because it's incredibly useful. Next is the last of the power-ups that originate from the first game, being the Invincibility Star. This power-up is unique, being the only temporary power-up. Stars will give you the power of invincibility for a short duration, letting you plow through enemies at will. Unfortunately though, you still aren't immune to death pits. Stars are also unique, appearing from specific question mark blocks regardless of your health state. Getting into the new stuff, we have the poster child for this game, the Raccoon Leaf. The leaf gives Mario a raccoon tail and ears, allowing you to do a spin attack as well as slow your fall with the jump button. Like I mentioned earlier, if you reach maximum P-speed, you will be able to fly upwards while you retain max speed. This is often used to reach secret areas and is very useful for skipping enemies and obstacles. Similar to the Leaf, the Tanuki suit is a flat upgrade to the Leaf, albeit less common, giving you a full suit this time and giving you the new ability of turning into an invincible statue for a very short time. This isn't the most useful extra ability, but definitely has its niche uses.
Okay.
The next 2 additions are both some of my favorites in the series. The first of which is the Frog suit. As the name implies, Mario looks and moves around like a frog, hopping instead of walking or running. You don't actually gain much from this power-up, and it's actually quite a hindrance on land. However, in water you're able to move much more freely and quickly. The last main power-up is the Hammer suit. This basically turns you into a hammer bro, allowing you to lob hammers at enemies and shield yourself from some projectiles using the shield by crouching. Unfortunately, you do lose the ability to slide down slopes, but it's very much worth it in my eyes. There's technically one more power-up, but it's only ever seen in one level in the entire game. In 5-3, you'll find Goombas using the Goomba shoe. If you manage to commandeer this for yourself, it will allow you to safely jump on spiked enemies and walk over munchers. This power-up is also unique, not overriding any current power-ups you have, and you're even able to still use your ability while in this shoe. This game was the first to really have the player decide which power-up they want at a given time. For example, I think without knowing the level or situation I was about to get into, I would almost always choose the Hammer suit. This game has a pretty cool solution for this potential dilemma too. You'll notice that in the overworld, you now have an inventory that stores both power-ups and items. Both are received through toad houses, overworld enemy battles, and the N mark spade tiles. You can only use this menu while you're not in a level, which balances it out quite well. You can store up to 28 items in your menu at once, which amounts to 4 full rows. Items are also stored here and are also quite useful. Most items are only useful for the overworld itself, with all of them having niche uses. There are 6 total. I'll start with the P-Wing since it's not like the others. The P-Wing is basically a super powered power-up, giving you the Raccoon Leaf and keeps your P-Speed maxed out for the next level you play, regardless if you're running or not. This essentially allows you to fly over an entire level. Once you complete the level, you'll keep the leaf, but your P-meter will revert back to normal. The next and first of the traditional items is the Lakitu Cloud. You can use this item to skip over a level of your choosing. However, it doesn't count the level you skip over as completed, so make sure that you don't die before completing something. The next item is similar to the last, being the Music Box. Instead of letting you skip a level, this will put any Hammer Bro or Muncher in the overworld to sleep, letting you bypass them without having to fight. Going along with skipping things, we have the Hammer. Although this is somewhat unique. Hammers allow you to break rocks in the overworld, which usually block shortcuts or alternate paths. I unfortunately feel like these aren't that useful since there are only 2 rocks that are blocking something of great value. Those being the one blocking the secret path in World 2 and the one blocking the dock in World 3. Another item that I don't find much use for is the anchor. The anchor can be used on airships in the overworld to prevent them from moving if you happen to die. I guess it's more useful if you like to skip levels, but since I didn't, I had no reason to ever use one. Funnily enough though, I never even got one because they're only gotten through a hidden mechanic that I only just found out about while researching for this video, which is now the 2nd time this has happened.
Mamma mia.
Apparently, if you get a specific amount of coins in specific levels, you'll be brought to a white toad house where you'll receive either a P-wing or an anchor depending on the level. There are only 7 levels in the game where you can do this, and without looking it up, you have no way of finding out which levels they are and how many coins you need. Either way, with that weirdness out of the way, the last item and most useful is the magic whistle. Magic whistles, when used, will allow you to skip entire worlds by sending you to the warp zone. Depending on the world you're in, you could potentially skip up to 5 worlds. If you're in World 1, you can skip up until World 4. If you use it in Worlds 2 through 6, you can go to Worlds 5 through 7, and using it in World 7 will allow you to skip to World 8. Using it in World 8 won't do you any good since 8 is the final world. However, I'm not sure if this is a bug or oversight, but the warp zone technically counts as World 9, despite there being no playable levels. That means that if you were to use a warp whistle here, you can instantly go to World 8. Which means that you can pretty much go straight from World 1 to 8 by using a warp whistle in World 1, followed by immediately using another one in the warp zone to go to World 8. There are only 3 warp whistles obtainable, with them being found in World 1-3, World 1-Fortress, and by defeating the Fire Bro down the secret path in World 2. It wouldn't be a Mario game if it didn't have its fair share of enemies. This game has a pretty big variety of enemies, with lots of them being series staples, whether this was their first game or not. My personal favorite, not just enemy, but character in not just this game, but the series as a whole, is easily the Boos. They're ghosts who will pursue you when you aren't looking, but freeze and hide their face when you are. They were introduced in this game, which I will forever be grateful to it for that reason. I can't exactly explain why I love Boos so much, but I'm so happy that I get to exist at the same time as these silly, shy, rotund rascals. Also, as a small fun fact, in this game only, they were referred to as Boo Diddlies. Generally though, enemies will try to hurt you by either running into you, hoping you run into them, or by throwing something at you. Some enemies can be defeated, and those that are, either are susceptible to being jumped on or hit by one of Mario's power-up attacks. Enemies usually take only 1 hit for them to go down unless they're a boss or a special enemy, such as, but not limited to, the Dastardly Angry Sun or the boss Bass, which is not a boss by the way, that's just his name. Speaking of bosses though, there are 3 types of boss battles, those being with either Boom Boom, one of the 7 Koopalings, or Bowser himself. Boom Boom is the most common boss, appearing at the end of every fortress. He takes 3 jumps on his head to go down, but has a few melee attacks to try to stop you. The Koopalings are mostly the same apart from 1 or 2 small elements that change how you fight each one, although all of them will go down the same way as Boom Boom. At the end of Worlds 1 through 7's airships, you fight one of the 7 Koopalings. Each fight is generally the same with small differences usually involving their attacks. Some try to shoot projectiles from the magic wand, some are bigger and will try to use their size against you, and some are more unique. The 2 I want to highlight specifically are Wendy for her difficult to dodge projectiles, and Lemmy's bouncy ball shenanigans, constantly throwing you around his arena. You encounter them in this order: Larry in World 1, Morton in World 2, Wendy in World 3, as if that world couldn't get any more annoying, Iggy in World 4, Roy in World 5, Lemmy in World 6, and Ludwig von Koopa in World 7. Before moving on to the big man himself, I just wanted to point out that if you haven't noticed by now, all of the Koopalings are named after various musical artists. The fight with Bowser takes place in his castle. Similar to the first game, before you reach his room, he will shoot fireballs at you. When you do reach him, he will try to attack you by either ground pounding you or from his fire breath. He's immune to being jumped on and power-up attacks. The key to beating him is getting him to take out the brick floor in the middle of the room, making him fall to his doom. You can do this in as little as 3 ground pounds. This version of the game I played for this video, being the SNES version, features a 2-player exclusive mode called Battle Mode. Battle Mode is a remake of the Mario Bros. Arcade game, not to be confused with Super Mario Bros., with this remake focusing on the brothers competing rather than helping each other. Your goal is to outlast the other player by avoiding getting hit and trying to send enemies their way. This mode isn't really for me, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't get any fun out of it. It doesn't affect my overall enjoyment of the game, however.
Piece of the cake.
In terms of difficulty, Mario 3 is a basic platformer that has a fair amount of challenge while still being welcoming to newcomers. Since it is an older game, game overs are slightly more punishing than modern Mario games. Levels are generally pretty short and straightforward half of the time. There are a few levels I want to highlight as being particularly challenging. 3-3 first comes to mind, being the level where Boss Bass is pursuing you while the water levels are constantly rising and falling. 7-4 coincidentally comes to mind, being the pinnacle of underwater levels, but is made much easier with the frog suit. 7-8 is also quite difficult, being a gauntlet of piranha plants and their variants. 7-airship is somewhat difficult, but is more so just super long, which can make the level a pain if you die, especially towards the end. Lastly, you can pretty much list any level from World 8 as difficult, but in particular, I want to highlight the 2 normal levels. 8-1 just has so much going on and feels somewhat like trial and error. 8-2 is a bit easier, but still a challenge, featuring the angry sun as well as several enemies and tough platforming. I don't know how many times I died throughout the game, but I will say that I was definitely being reckless at some points, which contributed to a few of my deaths. But overall, I never got a game over and finished the game with 22 lives. That number sounds good, and it is quite comfortable, but is tainted when you're told that I peaked at 42 lives and entered World 8 with 41. I guess that's partially potentially because extra lives are the least common to get in World 8. Also, the timer was never much of a factor for me. I think there were a few rare times where I'd gotten the 100 timer warning, but for the most part, the 300 seconds is more than enough. Either way, this game is very easy to pick up and play for a short while and put down. Playing the game from start to finishing while not skipping a single level took me just about 4 hours, so it's a very low commitment game. Although, please make sure that if you stop playing at all, make sure to stop after you beat a world, since stopping in the middle of a world will act similar to a game over, putting you back at the start of the world and only having saved fortresses, your life pool, and inventory. When it comes to the graphics, Mario 3 is much older than I am, but both the NES and more so the SNES 2D pixel art styles still hold up incredibly well. Mario 3 is such a colorful game and is always nice to look at. Its art style is set up to look like a stage play, with the game opening with curtains and some of the platforms being bolted to the background, which is cute. The music is catchy and never a bother to listen to. It's certainly not my favorite video game soundtrack out there, but every song in this game's small soundtrack is good. My personal favorite is the Sky World theme. SMB3 has a mildly convoluted history when it comes to the different ways that you can play it. There's 3 different versions of the game available on 7 different consoles. Thankfully, once you break it down, it's a lot more digestible. I usually like to go in release order, but this time that would cause me to jump from version to version constantly. So instead I'm going to talk about each version one at a time. Super Mario Bros. 3 was originally released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1990 in the US. This version is not the version you've seen throughout this video, so it looks and sounds a bit more primitive, but is still quite good for its time. Unfortunately, this version was made before saving your progress was made a staple feature, so that means that unless the platform you're playing on remedies this, then you'll have to beat the entire game in one go. The original SMB3 on the NES typically goes for around $15 online, which is surprisingly cheap compared to what I thought it'd be. It used to be available through the virtual consoles on the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS, but all 3 of those services have been shut down for a while now. There are 2 more mono releases you can get though. The first being included as one of the several games in the NES Classic Mini Console released in 2016, which goes for about $75 since it's an entire console that comes bundled with other games. The other more accessible and affordable option is through the NES catalog released in 2018 on the Nintendo Switch's online subscription service, which is $20 per year with their cheapest plan and is the best way to go if you want to play the original game. Not only that, but the NSO version lets you play with a friend online, making it the first and only way to do so. The game was bundled with the first two titles as well as Lost Levels and sometimes even Super Mario World and Super Mario All-Stars, which released on the Super NES in 1993. This version is the one I played for the footage for this video. It features updated graphics, sounds, and music, plus the aforementioned battle mode. You can get it for around the same price as the NES version, or if you want to fork over some more cash, you can get the version that also contains Super Mario World. The All-Stars version saw two other releases, one physical and one digital. The physical release came in the form of the Mario All-Stars 25th Anniversary Edition, released on the Wii in 2010. This game came bundled with a special bonus disc that featured select sounds and music from various Mario games and a booklet detailing Mario's 25-year journey up to that point. You can get the disc and case for as low as $25 online. The digital version is again through the Switch's online premium service, this time being the SNES app. Despite it being released 2 years later, it's part of the same subscription that gets you the NES version. Just like the NSO NES version, you can play with one other person online. The last version, and the one I admittedly know the least about, is the Super Mario Advance 4 version, originally released on the Game Boy Advance in 2003. The reason it's called Advance 4 and not 3 is because the 3 previous games to be re-released in the Advance series are Mario 2, then Super Mario World, and then Yoshi's Island. It doesn't make the naming convention any less confusing, even with an explanation. Either way, this version takes after the SNES version except sounding and looking a bit crunchier since it's a Game Boy. It does feature battle mode as well as a new opening cutscene and has e-reader card support that lets you play an entire new world. You can get this for around $20, which isn't bad at all. There's one version of the game no longer playable, which was available from the Wii U VC. There is one modern option available, which is again through NSO, but this time is locked behind their expansion pack service since it includes GBA titles. This costs you $50 per year instead of the usual $20, which isn't too bad, but not worth it for me, especially since I believe that the All-Stars version is the best way to play. Getting to talk about Mario games always feels nice since they always, without fail, flood my memories of playing or discussing that particular game with my dad. I'm very glad that I got to play it with him so many years ago, and I'm thankful for NSO for letting me do it again in today's age, even if I do live thousands of miles away now. Before I get into ranking it, I want to quickly give a thank you to Lunadium/Viper073 for playing the battle mode with me for this video, and beating me in it so I know how it feels to lose? Wait, I don't remember adding that part. Now when it comes to ranking this game, it wasn't too difficult for me to find its place. Super Mario Bros. 3 will go in the number 13 spot behind Pokemon Red and Blue. I know that this may seem harsh, and to that I say I love all these games, and that Mario 3 is just scratching the surface for me when it comes to Mario games, so stay tuned on that front. At the same time though, its age does show sometimes with the inability to replay levels and only being able to world select in the menus on older versions. While tempting, the introduction of the boos didn't deter me from placing this where I did. Thank you all so much for watching. Who's your favorite Mario enemy if you have one? I don't even need to say mine at this point. Also, I just want to thank each and every one of you again for letting my channel reach bigger and better heights with the Halo 2 video. Please, if you haven't yet and wouldn't mind, please subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed it, and comment letting me know what you think. A huge part of why I do this is to get the opinions of others on my favorite games. Thanks again, and I hope to see you again soon!
Please give me your big booze. You make me cuckoo crazy.